Hey, Channel Insiders. Welcome back to Channel Insider Partner POV. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso, and my guest today is Hans Mize, president and founder of Data41, a value-added reseller whose evolution building out an independent software arm of the business includes several stories about how AI can truly help humans. Hans explains how Data41 found a special niche in the life sciences market, and how his company plays a part in matching children with care and patients with the organ donations they need. Welcome, Hans. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a really nice opportunity, have an opportunity to talk about what we do here at Data41.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited. This is our second conversation in the last about 5-7 days, something like that. And I've been thinking about this ever since we first virtually met, because your story is incredible for so many reasons. So I want to start all the way back at the beginning in how the company was founded. So I'm going to summarize a few key points, because I know that you started in 2006 and essentially you wanted to start your own business as a way to basically call your own shots. It sounds like you were a real road warrior and you no longer wanted to do that for somebody else. You wanted to invest in yourself and your dreams. So take me back to 2006, where your mind was and what you wanted Data41 to be at that time and what it's evolved into now.
Yeah, it's quite an evolution. I mean, back in 2006, I'd put together a business plan for the better part of a year and looking at market opportunity and analytics, and it wasn't called analytics back then, was one of those hot topics, and decided to kind of go down that path. And it was a lot of personal pressure that kind of forced me into, okay, how do I actually analyze my career, and how do I analyze what I want to do? And I had a young family at home, 3 daughters, wife who's also professional, a lot of stress on her when I had to travel a lot. And so we just kind of came to this decision, let's invest in ourselves. You've always wanted to go out and run a company, whether you got promoted into it or you started one, let's give it a shot and see what you can do. So I started in a spare bedroom in the house, 2006, partnered up with a small software company in Westborough, Massachusetts. And we're a reseller partner, professional services, so on and so forth, had 1 employee. And then within about a little less than 12 months, they were acquired by a larger software company out of Burlington, Massachusetts. And so we go from being, a minnow in a small pond to a minnow in a fairly large lake. And then about 12 months after that, that company was acquired by IBM. And then all of a sudden, we're a minnow in the ocean. And that was the first, 2.5 years of me starting the company. So it's been quite the evolution. And, when you put together a business plan, everything is like perfectly laid out and perfectly drawn out, and you're going to execute perfectly. And basically within the first month, that business plan was obsolete, and had to make adjustments. And again, maturation that comes with it as well. And so it's been a pretty interesting journey, a lot of fun, a lot of high highs, a lot of low lows, but it's something I wouldn't trade for anything.
So talk to me about where you are with Data41 right now, because I know that you were primarily a VAR, a value-added reseller, but you've definitely had a shift in the last 2 years. Walk me through what your priorities are now and your ultimate goals as a business.
Yeah, and I probably have to kind of recap, the journey a little bit more as far as how we got here and some of the things that happened along the way, because I think it really adds a lot of context as to why you have to change. And if you just look at the industry and then you look at some of the macroeconomic factors that come into play as well. So, when we were starting, I started out as a reseller, but, we were more professional services oriented. So in order to grow a company, especially top line revenue, and with, the software resale being a small part of your business, you have to actually add headcount. And you've got headcount, very experienced people that actually provide consulting services for clients. And then, once you get to a point where you've got the backlog that is needed in order to produce the revenue to support the operating cost, you've got to add another headcount if you want to grow top line revenue. And that was really the model. And we had the software VAR aspect of it, the resale aspect of it, the gross margin you get from that as a fundamental piece of the game as well. So we go through 2 acquisitions that really changed the dynamics of who we are as a company. And you go from, okay, goodness, we're working with a small software company, and we actually had influence, to going through the entire ecosystem change into IBM and not really having a voice or influence. And okay, how do we actually survive, number one? And then the second part is, how do we actually thrive in this environment? So you have to make adjustments. All the while, the industry is also changing. So the industry is going from, okay, great, we started out focused on the Office of Finance, for budgeting, planning, forecasting, automating that, kind of the golden era of that type of solution. And then those acquisitions take place and we have to expand our footprint. So we're still a VAR, still a reseller, but with a widened solution set. And then trying to add folks, again, in order to grow top line revenue so you can cover costs, everything fundamental to a business. So simultaneous to that, big data starts coming in. That's part of the conversation. So everybody's shifting their attention to what is big data and analytics, so on and so forth. Then all of a sudden after that, cloud is the next big topic coming in. And so you start, okay, well, how do we adjust and adapt the company to be able to take advantage of this, but also position ourselves to be able to, for some longevity. And then, lo and behold, here we are, probably 2-3 years ago, AI has really consumed the conversation, right? It's top of mind for everybody. And what it's done is that it's offered us an opportunity to look at what the market wants, what is really hot, and what is actually exciting about the market, and what can fundamentally change the way people go about business. And we found an opportunity to be able, through a project, to take it, commercialize it, and take part of our business and transform ourselves into an ISV, so an independent software vendor instead. So becoming a software company. So our old model's still in place. We're not abandoning that. We've got a long history and a lot of great clients and relationships. But this new model is based on AI, and it's kind of given us a different way to look at the business and a different opportunity to produce revenue. But more importantly, what type of outcome can we produce for our clients based on their needs?
So going through this conversation of evolution, you mentioned a project where it kind of took you on that journey to becoming an ISV. That was not necessarily the plan for you, but you got there. I know that you hired your first AI engineer 2 years ago, almost like to the day this month that we're recording in right now. Talk to me about the original plan, building out an AI practice and what you were hoping to do with that. And was ISV ever on the table for you, or did that happen accidentally? Walk me through where that really turned into that independent software vendor aspect for you.
What's interesting about it is, looking at our heritage business model, being the VAR, being the professional services organization, and the challenges that come with how do you actually grow the company, right? And it's through headcount. And it's wonderful when you have a great team like we do here, but it's also very challenging because we focus on a very niche aspect of industry that's very, very specialized. So it's not as if there's a whole plethora of people that we can go out and get if we need additional headcount. So it creates some challenges and nuances that we have to overcome, different periods of time throughout the year and near term, long term, so on and so forth. So we decided many years ago that we wanted to do some type of IP development. And we've had some starts and stops with other aspects of IP development in that we've created content. We would license that content, and once kind of as a head start to the solutions that we offered. And that worked out for a while. And the industry moved so fast, and all of a sudden that content was created by a lot of other people. So the value of that actually kind of diminished over time. So we had to go back to the drawing board. What else can we do? So when AI became top of mind, and you had the frenzy of everything that AI can do, and it's really the kind of the panacea. We install it and everything works magically and makes everybody's lives better. We knew better than that. The biggest challenge that we had is that because the frenzy was so chaotic, and the folks and the engineers that are needed in order to get something off the ground, there was a lot of competition for that. Competitions with all the big names in the tech industry that make the news every day. And I was very, very fortunate that we were able to hire our first AI engineer on November 6th, 2023, and he came on board. And what the catalyst to that hire was, number one, we wanted to build an AI practice, but in order to do that, you either partner or you hire folks for that. So we had the opportunity to make the hire. But about 2 weeks before that, I got a phone call from an old client in social services, McKinley Children's Center. And they reached out and says, hey, we would like to find a way to bring AI into our operation. And if you're willing, we'd like to talk to you about, how you might be able to help us do that. And that was the start. So that was the catalyst to hire our first AI engineer. And then, several months later, we actually embarked upon a project for them. And it's just been very fulfilling, both in terms of, trying to find a way to transform our business, but at the same time, producing an outcome that, a lot of folks, beyond just the financial outcomes that you would expect and productivity outcomes, with metrics and quantities associated with it, it was an outcome that affected people. And that has actually been a really, really neat experience for us.
First of all, I have to say, I think you're the king of pivoting and figuring things out, because it's amazing as we talk about AI and iterating with AI, but when we talk about business, it has to be the same thing. And you've really found a great way to continue to iterate on what your business is going to do based on what your clients need and what the market itself is demanding at the time. So to do that in such a short period of time is really impressive. Now, you mentioned McKinley Children's Center, and
Mhm.
there's some beautiful success stories there that I would love to talk about. But I also want to dig into kind of your pinnacle moment of where you realized life sciences is going to be the niche that we're going to be practicing in. Can you talk to me about the tissue bank that you partnered with to become what you are now, essentially today at Data41?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is one of those where we were looking for an opportunity, but this one, to a certain extent, more lucky than good. So we actually embarked upon a sales cycle with a company that was looking to bring in generative AI into the front end of their donor analysis process. And basically, we got a lead from IBM, who's been a wonderful partner for many years, along with Anger Micro, and we went into a joint sales cycle with them, and basically looked at the requirements, looked at the outcome, looked at what they were trying to accomplish, and they decided to move forward with us, and we embarked upon that project. And basically, what it is that they are a tissue processor, so they have an array of different types of inventory they produce, from donor tissue. So when the donor tissue comes in, they have to look at the eligibility aspect of that particular donor, and it's everything from it's a cadaveric donor. So basically, they're looking everything from illnesses, diseases, exposure to different types of disease like malaria or hepatitis, and then also looking at lifestyle. And then from that criteria, they can come up with a set of guidelines on whether or not that donor matches and is eligible for the tissue processing that they do specifically. So there are a number of analysts that they use on the front end that comb through hundreds of pages of donor record documentation on a manual basis to ensure that they're an eligible donor. And as they go through that process, as you would imagine, depending on how long you've been doing it, skill set, context is really important here as well, in terms of, certain things that they look for, and then obviously time. So they wanted to bring an AI solution that actually helped them with that. So we actually developed that solution. So at the front end, they'd actually look at donor eligibility. And then from there, once they determine, okay, we have the eligibility and they match up, then they have suitability in terms of what, downstream production of, products they can manufacture that will then be used for the end patient. So it was really trying to streamline that. So as we finished up that project, we had a dialogue with them, and they told us, there's an entire industry of companies just like us that could benefit from this type of solution. You should look at attending this conference called the AATB conference and trying to showcase your solution, because you'll probably get a lot of demand from it. So we took their advice, made the investment, and about a little less than a year and a half ago, in October of 2024, we actually attended the AATB conference. And sure enough, right, we had all kinds of interest come from that. So from there, we decided to commercialize a software product, and go out to market like as a software company, and basically to focus on that part of the donor lifecycle management aspect of that industry. And we landed our first client back in May, and things have actually been very positive since. And we have a really good opportunity not only to go in and provide automation through AI, but if you look at the end product, the end goal is how do we compress the cycle of them bringing in the donor tissue to produce a finished product that can get to the patient, and try to do that without error, more accurately, and to do it faster. Because, human lives are actually being affected by this. We're not doing it, they are, but at least we're part of that process.
I'm curious to know, did you ever hear about how your software was able to help somebody get what they needed faster from this tissue bank? That might be a question that you wish you knew. I know in healthcare they probably can't talk about it, but I'm curious, did they ever talk to you about how it helped them be able to impact human lives in real time?
Yeah, we actually haven't gotten that far. I mean, we're still fairly early in the relationship and the
Sure.
solution. And AI, as you know, it's one of those. Also, there's a maturation that's taking place. The technology is still has a ways to go to be able to have the data points in order to really compress that cycle. And one of the things I like to say is that AI is very heavy on nomenclature, but very light on jargon. And when you get into a very specialized industry, you need a lot of those data points with the jargon. And so our solution is growing and becoming more intelligent every day with more use. However, one of the things that one of the philosophies that I think that we really absorbed and have taken to heart. I had a conversation with the CEO of one of our donor clients, and he was talking about there's a psychological and emotional aspect, kind of going to your point about that industry. So it's one thing to take in a donor, and many times a family has to make the decision on whether or not someone becomes deceased member of their family becomes a donor, and he referenced that as a gift. And he says one of the things that we have to ensure that we do with that gift is to respect the fact that somebody wants to be able to touch many other lives, and we have to look at that, and we have to ensure that we're accurate, we're precise, and that we utilize the tissue downstream in a manner that it's going to be able to be productive for the recipients of that final product, so that we can go back to families and tell them these are the lives that you affected, and here's how those lives were affected by the donation that you made, by the gift that you made. And we took that to heart because we're a small piece of their entire process, but we know that we can make an impact, especially if we can help them do this better. And it's very fulfilling to be able to offer a solution, especially a technology solution, because it's so conceptual, to be able to have an impact on society and community and individual lives.
That's incredible. And I totally agree about calling it a gift. And you really want to respect to get it from point A to point B the way
Mm-hmm.
that it was meant to, and as efficiently as possible. So it's one of those conversations, Hans, I'm sure you know, because you go to all these conferences, you talk to so many people. We don't always get to see the solutions and the work that we do inside of this industry impact the real side of human life. So much happens outside of the help desk, but that is just an incredible story to hear. And I know that this is one of many. I know you've also been working, as you said, with McKinley Children's Center, and I would just love to give you another opportunity to talk about a success story there that Data41 has been able to help.
Yeah, it was really nice, and it's one of these. It's funny, magic happens through conversation. And I had a conversation with our some folks from our partner Ear Micro, and just kind of shared the story of what we're doing with AI. Everybody at the time was like, "Do we have any partners that are actually doing AI? They're providing solutions?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got one. Let me tell you what we're doing." So a few months go by, and they approached us, said, "Would it be possible to get McKinley to co-present with you at the Ingram Micro One conference in 2024?" I said, "Well, let me see. We're kind of in the middle of this endeavor right now. Let me see where they're at." So McKinley actually helps at-risk youths. They've been doing this for 100 years. They've been around literally 100 years. They started out as a foster school for boys, and then over time you talk about adapting to what's happening, and having to kind of remold yourself and ensure that you're relevant in order to survive. But more importantly, providing services back to the community. They've been doing this for 125 years. They've celebrated in October of this
Oh my
year.
goodness.
Yeah, it's a long time. I mean, for this type of social service. So they have a long storied history of what they've done for the community. And so whenever they reached out to me and says, "Can you help us with AI?" The questions at that time were fairly prevalent. My answers backwards and sure. What would you like us to help you with? This is, well, that's why we're calling you. And I said, okay, well, it's a little bit more in depth than that because this is very use case driven, very data driven, and outcome based. And so they had to go through an exercise of looking at the outcomes that they wanted to try to derive from AI. And they came back with about 10 or 12 use cases. And then we prioritized those and decided to embark upon one of those. So they have a number of clinicians, better known as therapists or social workers, that take on case files for children. So they meet these children, and the level of need varies. Some of them are dealing with traumatic events that most people don't even encounter in their lifetime, and they're having to work with these kids. And many times these clinicians come on board, and they're given a set of kids, especially if the clinicians are new and they've got case files, similar to the donors, case files can be, 100 to 300 pages on average, up to 1,000 pages. Same thing. Mostly digitized documents that they have to comb through, look at the history of the child, look at what they're treating the child for, try to get an idea of the clinicians or the caseworkers ahead of them, what they walk them through. So trying to get a really good history of the child and then develop a treatment plan. As you can imagine, they went to school, they're professionals, they're very, very empathetic, and they want to be able to make a difference. And there's a lot of regulatory paperwork that comes with being in this job. So a lot of their time was being consumed by having to fill out paperwork. Number one, reading the paperwork to get an idea of who the child was. And then after the fact, developing a treatment plan for the child, and then having to then do additional paperwork so that it adhered to the policies and procedures of the different, regulatory agencies that McKinley works with. So what we did is we developed a solution that would basically summarize the front end of the process to where it would review the hundreds, to thousands of pages of case files for the clinicians so that they can hit the high points and have a really good understanding of what treatment would be needed for the children in order to visit with them, come up with a treatment plan. And the goal was not only put together a treatment plan, but to be able to produce a positive outcome. And so this was sent out to, I forgot what the sample size was, a few months ago, a number of clinicians to be able to do this, to get them in the mold of using this. But, a lot of their week would be consumed by paperwork. And they weren't trained to do paperwork. They're trained to actually interact with the kids. And so this was consuming more of their time than the actual face time with the kids. So we're trying to free up, a lot of what their work week looks like so they can focus on the kids. So the kids know that they've got somebody sitting in front of them that actually cares about them, that is going to put forth all the effort needed to help them, become positive members of society. And then, the paperwork aspect of it is, we compress the cycle time on that and make it more of, an afterthought rather than something that is too burdensome.
I think that is absolutely so beautiful. We don't hear too often about the side of AI where it helps humans. It's one of those headlines that does not make it to the top. This is that headline that I want to shout from the rooftops right now about how it's able to help these kids. That's incredible. Hans, you mentioned about McKinley coming to you and saying, we would like help with AI. And you're like, how? And they went, how would you recommend it?
Right.
How has that process with working with customers eased up over the last few years as you've done it more? Are you able to go in now with a sort of template and saying, well, here's what you need to consider so that we know how to serve you? How does that conversation go?
Yeah, it was a learning experience for us as well. We're walking in and so, okay, great. We've got our AI engineer on board now, and we've been basically selling and positioning analytic solutions, from day one. So there were a lot of similarities with how we position analytic solutions and the process that we followed, and how you kind of follow a similar process with AI. We didn't know that at the time, though. So when we engaged, the conversation was almost like, hit play, hit stop, hit rewind, and then hit play again. It was the same conversation because we were interacting with clients. And I think a lot of it's because of the chaos and confusion the industry is providing. AI is going to just be this magic thing that you install, like I said earlier, and it just works. Well, it doesn't work that way. So the initial conversations were, hey, can you help us with AI? I said, of course. How would you like for us to help you? I said, well, that's why we're calling you. And that happened over and over and over again. And so we had to basically change the way that we interact. It's okay. Number one, right? Let's look at what outcome you want to get. So, okay, well, how do we determine an outcome? And so look at the things that actually take a lot of time in your organization, either something that's very manual or even something that's automated, but there's multiple steps. And we can actually kind of help out with either one of those, then prioritize those on impact, right? What is going to have the highest impact in your organization if you can relieve yourself of some of that inefficiency? Then the other thing is look at what would it take as far as your investment in time and cost in order to, be able to move a solution forward. So, we kind of do a T-chart on this stuff and come up with a use case and then come to an agreement on that use case. Then we go in and do a prototype and says, okay, here's what we got based on the information that you have. And then the prototype would move into, okay, well, how do we actually, look at this from a solution standpoint? So a lot of the same steps, but the dialogue matured and evolved, over the course of, a year to 2 years. And I think that the consumers actually gotten smarter as well, right? There's a lot more information out there now. There's
True.
more collaboration they have within their own networks of peers and who's doing what. And we've also got, more, I think, defined use cases now than they were in the very beginning. So they have that as a backdrop to kind of use as a reference point as well.
Very good points there. Yeah, the user audience has definitely become a lot more educated just because it's been so
Mm-hmm.
ubiquitous across what we can use as far as just on our personal computers and cell phones, and then what's being implemented at our jobs. So, a great point there. Now, speaking of that, obviously, AI has advanced so much in the last 2 years, but it's not all the way there. It is going to be
No.
something that continues to be iterated on. What roadblocks do you still run into with artificial intelligence, and how are you hoping it continues to iterate in the future? What would you like to see it be able to do to get past those roadblocks?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things, right? There's an emotional aspect of it in that every single day you read online articles, AI is going to take our jobs. So the people that we're interacting with are the ones that are most fearful that AI is going to take their job, because all of a sudden they're helping develop a solution that's basically taking away some of the things that they do on a day-to-day critical basis. So we have to overcome that psychological aspect of it, that it's not necessarily going to take away jobs. It's going to take away certain functions within jobs that will actually enhance your value to the organization because you're focused on those things that matter most and you have more time to do it. So that's one aspect of it. Then the other, like I said a bit earlier, if you look at AI in general, very powerful. But I view AI as a tool. Use ChatGPT, Perplexity, some of the other ones online, right? It's a new way to look for information, and then you've got the different vendors with solutions that you can actually implement internally to be able to go out there and get to that information. Also, a new way to retrieve information, a new way to consume information, a new way to compose information. It's really hard to quantify how much that is affecting your organization positively and increasing productivity. It's assumed that it does, and it's one of these that everyone's accepted the fact that it does, but it's hard to put a number to it. Agentic AI, I believe, is going to make a big difference. We just don't have enough of those yet. And then the interoperability between different types of agents and what they do, and the conflicts when they overlap, is going to be pretty interesting. But I think that's going to be one of those areas where we see a big jump in productivity to where it's really solving problems. And then the second part is that as we're getting into these niche industries, the AI models aren't built for those industries in particular. So there's going to be a lot of training and a lot of data that has to be input into those models in order to build the intelligence to where they're making a difference. And we're living through that right now in the tissue bank industry, because each one of them it's a very competitive industry in that they've got their own confidential processes that are not confidential, but their own discrete process that they use within their organization that separates them from another tissue bank that does the same thing. So there's not a whole lot of sharing of information. There's sharing of we're using this vendor, but there's not sharing of how we're using this particular vendor. So as we start training these models, we're doing it on more of a siloed basis. But if we could take that information and aggregate it, it would have a dramatic effect on that industry, a more positive effect that could be utilized across the entire industry. But it's going to take some maturation to get there as well. So we're still in the infancy of it. The models are getting smarter. The way that we're utilizing technology is maturing, and the way that we're actually composing a solution that produces an outcome, we're becoming more effective at it. And like I said, it's moving at a very fast pace. But at the same time, right, there's this process of refinement and incremental gains that we're getting that is moving at I'd say a more normal pace.
Well, speaking of pace, how are you continuing to iterate with artificial intelligence into 2026 at this point? We're almost to the end of the year. I know that you're constantly looking to also grow on the solutions and the outcomes that you've already been able to bring to market. What are some ways that Data 41 is continuing to iterate with AI?
Yeah, one of the most obvious ones, just using it internally. So
Yeah.
we've had, most of the products from technology companies now are infused with AI to some extent. And so some of the solutions from our heritage EPM business has that infused now, and just getting the team up to speed on it because we're viewed as the experts. So if that's another component of it, we need to understand and be able to pontificate, the value of AI within the solutions that we've developed through our heritage business. The other part is, looking ahead. 2 years ago, we were just trying to become a branded AI company, experts in AI. And we've had a lot of demand come our direction. And we know that we can't be all things to all people. And we're trying. And so we've got to be a little bit more focused on what part of the business and where do we actually want to play in AI. So with the donor lifecycle management, working with the organ processors, our procurement organizations, as well as the tissue banks, that is an area that, we're going all in. We see a huge opportunity. We got some brand recognition now. And then looking at social services, that's another area. Although, with the geopolitical environment right now, they've been hit a bit, funding and just trying to find their way, and then looking at AI to come and alleviate some of that. But it's a long process. So we're looking at that as another opportunity. Obviously, you look at it from a P&L and general ledger perspective, how do we actually, maximize what we're doing? But that particular industry, if you look at what we could do to be able to affect the community, it has a whole different meaning. So, it's one that we're looking at pretty hard as well, because we get the contacts, we've got the use case, and it's one that I think we can actually go in there and help make a difference, but it's more meaningful than just, dollars and cents. And so we're looking at that. And then you've got custom AI projects, and we're being very selective about which ones we try to work on because we just, we're running lean, and there's a lot of demand, and it's exciting, and it's transforming our company. But at the same time, we can only do so much.
No, it's important to pick your battles. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there is such a thing as stretching yourself too thin and not being able to help anybody. So you have to make sure you can help effectively those who you do help. Speaking of help and speaking of context that you mentioned, a couple of times during this interview, you've brought up IBM and you've brought up Ingram Micro. And I would love to just get a sense from you of how that vendor and that distributor have helped you be able to continue to grow. You talked about some deals being brought forward, but what has been the real get for you in having those relationships and being a part of those communities?
Yeah. So, IBM is one of those that we kind of got thrown into in the beginning. Fortunately for me, early in my career, I worked for an IBM partner as well. And it was a software company, but it wasn't traditional VAR, but it was a software company. So I had an understanding of what that ecosystem looked like and how they operated. So at least that wasn't foreign to me. But it took a lot of effort to kind of get in there. But I will say this about them, they're going through an evolution as well, just like most companies. Things are changing at a fast pace, and they want to ensure that they're relevant and their solutions are meaningful. But they've been a very, very good partner. They support the channel. They've been doing it a long time, and they've got a channel model that works. I mean, it's not perfect, and I don't think anybody's is, but they have a channel model that works. They support it. They make adjustments, and we've had a lot of longevity and a lot of success. And we've got some marquee names. Can't mention in this interview, but I've got some marquee names, household names that we've been able to have the privilege of calling our clients because of our relationship with IBM. Ingram, on the other hand, kind of came through, and we didn't even know what a distributor was back then when we entered the IBM ecosystem, and we had, I think, one of five we had to choose from. So we selected Ingram Micro because they're right here in our backyard in Irvine, California. And I would say that partnership is probably more impactful, not to diminish anything that IBM's doing. And part of the reason is that we started with them in 2009, and we've had also a wonderful relationship with them. But they've got relationships with hundreds of vendors. And, another vendor that we work with is Microsoft, and Ingram has been a great conduit to get to the right folks at Microsoft, especially with AI and helping out with that. But if you look at the hundreds of vendors that they manage and the number of partners that they do business with, and we had this happen a few weeks ago to where we need to establish a relationship with a software vendor that we have no contact with, we have no background with, we have no credibility with, but Ingram does. And they are our conduit into that software company that offers credibility, that gives us, some footing, that gives us this welcome introduction to somebody that we don't know. And there's going to be partnerships in the future that we don't know we need today that they're going to be able to help with and kind of foster that relationship. So they're really, really important from that respect. And another aspect of it is, just kind of touching real quick, we've had a few different inflection points in the company to having to adapt and change direction a bit. AI is probably the biggest one. But back in 2015, I joined Ingram Micro's TrustX Alliance. At the time, it was called the VTN, or Venture Tech Networks, and it was rebranded in 2016 to TrustX Alliance. And over the course of 10 to 11 years that I've been in that's probably been the biggest value add that Ingram's offered me, over and above, just your normal day-to-day business. But that is a community of partners just like us, a lot of collaboration, a lot of networking, a lot of opportunities to do business together. And it's opened up the doors to, I'm part of a masterminds program. So an executive, peer group that, meets once a quarter and really goes into the business, gives us access to executives, gave us the forum. Without TrustX Alliance, I would not have had the opportunity, nor would McKinley have the opportunity to be on main stage at the One Conference last year, right? So it gave us an opportunity to talk about what we're doing, kind of like now. It gave McKinley an opportunity to talk about what they're doing to a completely new audience. And all of that came through TrustX Alliance. And it's offered an opportunity for me to get others engaged in the company, to kind of bring them up in their tutelage and their mentorship, because they're the next wave of leaders. And this has been an absolutely awesome experience. Again, over and above just, them being a great partner for business.
I love to hear that. And this is why I love the channel. This is why I love to talk about it. So thank you very much for those amazing relationships that you've shared with us. I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to talk about any other vendor partners or partners in general that you might be working with that also deserve a shout out, since we've got the platform right now.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has been great as well. And again, this is, I think the initial aspect of it, started with Ingram Micro, being our advocate, getting us to the right level within Microsoft. Said you really need to help out Data41, right? They're doing some great things and getting us the exposure and credibility we needed when we didn't have those relationships. And they're really, really becoming a bigger centerpiece in our AI push. And so it's, we're just getting started. We're excited about it. They're excited about it. And we got a long way to go. But it's, you don't get these opportunities very often in industry. The last time was the .com boom. And all of a sudden now we've got AI, whether it's a bubble or not, the solutions actually matter, and the solutions are making a difference. And having a large vendor partner, backing you up makes, that journey that much easier.
I 100% agree. And they do. You're right. They actually matter. They're making a difference in human lives. And I'm excited to see where that continues in the future. Hans, as we start to wrap up here, I'm curious to know, looking back, like I said throughout this interview, you've evolved, you've pivoted, you've adapted to what the market is telling you to do and directing you where to go. You've really listened to your customers. With all of that, almost 2 decades now, knowledge in mind of running Data41, what would you say to the next person in line that is considering going out there and starting their own business, whether it's similar to yours or in the same channel industry or maybe something totally different? What advice do you have for somebody that's going out there to start their own business?
Yeah, surround yourself with good people. There's only so much. I mean, there's the old phrase: if you're going to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a team. And it's really true. We've lived, like I said, the challenges and trials and tribulations of running a small company. They're immense. And then you throw in the financial crisis in 2008, and then COVID. Getting through that, you can't do that by yourself. You've got to have a good team around you. You've got to have good partners. You've got to have a great relationship with your clients. And at the One Conference, several of the presenters talked about, it's not AI, it's the human connection. AI is just make that human connection kind of evolve a little faster. But you've got to have that human connection, right? We're dealing with technology, but we're infused in the technology that we're actually providing. But it's those relationships that are going to define the companies that are going to be successful in the future or not. And so make sure you got a good team. And I've just got a stellar, wonderful team. We've got folks. My number 2 employee has been with me for almost the entire 20 years. And that's a blessing, right? You don't get that with everybody. We've got folks that have been here for 15 years, half of their entire career, coming out of college, being with, my small company. So that's internal. And then you having, good partners, IBM, Microsoft, Ingram, folks that are going to advocate and look out for your best interests. By the way, yeah, we have to make money at the same time. Everybody gets that. It's just part of the business model, but you've got to manage, the top line, you've got to manage the bottom line as well. And that just comes, it's fundamental, and you have to do those things. but you got to have the people to help you get there, and to help you smooth out the undulations of when things are tough and when things are going really well. And I think that's the biggest difference, is just surrounding yourself with really, really good, genuine people.
I think that's phenomenal advice for so many people who are blazing their own trails. So thank you very much for sharing that, Hans. And if those watching want to learn more about Data41, want to get to know what you do, what you're doing out there in the world of life sciences and beyond, where can they go to learn more?
They can call us. We'd love to hear from them. We've got a website. We're actually kind of revamping our website now, and I'm on LinkedIn, and they can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to meet new people and expand the network and find out what we can do together.
Love to hear it. Well, Hans, thank you so much for your time today. I'm very excited to follow along and be a fan now of Data41 and see where you go in this market. So congratulations on all your success, and I'm looking forward to following along.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much to Hans for joining me today, and thank you for watching or listening. You can check out every episode of Channel Insider Partner POV on channelinsider.com, or watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/channelinsider_news and trends. You can also listen to us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow wherever possible so you never miss an episode. Come connect with Channel Insider on social media, on LinkedIn and X. Once again, I'm Katie Bavoso, and I'll see you next time.